Hello. I'm here again reviewing yet another gross icky movie about murder and violence, you know. I do like other movies, by the way. I like Titanic was pretty good. That's not particularly violent, right? I swear, I like other movies. The Thing is a horror movie. What? I know, crazy. And it was released like 40 years ago. It was released in 1982. It became basically a body horror classic, not overnight, because people actually hated this for some strange reason. I don't know why. It was too gory, they said. Ah! Whiny babies. I mean, it was the 80s, I guess. It now is the highest rated horror movie on Letterboxd with a 4.4 out of 5, which is like an 8.8 or whatever, and an 8.2 on IMDb. It's apparently the best thing ever made. I didn't personally have a religious experience watching it, so maybe I watched it wrong. I think that's what high ratings normally mean, right? You don't need an introduction to this movie. This is The Thing. It's The Thing. That's the name of the movie. Let's start off with cool and good things about this movie, because there's many good things. Of course, you can't mention The Thing without mentioning its practical effects. This stuff is the stuff of nightmares. It's amazing how much of this still holds up, which is kind of ironic because sure, you watch the movie, you see the monsters, they don't look good. It looks like a Muppet, okay? But if you are able to just like suspend your disbelief for a second, you'll see how gorgeous some of this stuff is, which is a weird word to describe these things, but they're really, it's beautiful stuff. I know nothing about practical effects, but knowing that this is all practical is just insane because I don't know how any of this was ever done, especially over 40 years ago. What? This is stupid. Each new monster comes in when it needs to. It fits the pacing of the story. It never feels like it's just blood and guts for the sake of it. There's a lot of creativity behind it. Every new monster feels like an entirely new thing. Well, you'd think, duh, of course. But, you'd be shocked at how unoriginal some horror movies are, at least in the past, 10 years. Another thing I liked a lot is the mystery. I didn't expect this to be such a weird murder mystery adjacent sort of thing. I think it's well structured. I like that there's sort of new creative ways that things are revealed to the audience. Now, my favorite scene isn't actually really any of the gory ones. It's actually the blood test scene where they sort of find out who is who. This isn't a spoiler, by the way. I won't say who is who. But I will say it's very effective at heightening the tension. I really like the more subtle way the reveal is done. It's not, it really builds up to a big climax, as in, instead of indulging constantly in blood and guts, what it does instead is it builds up to really big moments that shock you, and then you go back to sort of quiet tenseness. And I think that works really well. I want to point out specifically Kurt Russell's performance and his characterization is really cool stuff. I thought he did a really good job, and he was very believable at being a hard ass who doesn't care about anything. And I like how as the story progresses, he changes according to the things that happen to him without revealing too much, don't worry. I don't really have much to say about this because I'm not really a set designer, but the sets were really cool. And I think they do a really good job at being super claustrophobic and making us feel like we really have nowhere to go. We can't trust anyone around us. We're in the middle of nowhere in Antarctica. And it's a really cool setting for it. I think I couldn't imagine this movie happening anywhere else. In horror movies, you always have the problem of why don't they call the police? Why don't they just run away? Well, it's because they're in the middle of Antarctica. If they go out, they will die. This is their only safe place. And it's also their least safe place. That's sort of for the things that I like. Now, I wrote down a few things here that I was kind of in between on. Ending, I could really go either way on. It's hard to see if it was because it was possibly unsatisfying or because I just didn't really connect with the characters enough to justify it. I'm really trying to not spoil anything. But all I will say is that I found the ending to be a little underwhelming, and it didn't really hit me as hard as the movie tried to make me feel like it was, if that makes any sense. Another thing I'm also sort of in between on is kind of the music. And I'm in between on very literally because it feels like there's different kinds of music, right? From the first half to the second half. In the first half, you have sort of a more classical score, or you have more the typical 80s orchestral stuff. And then on the second half, when things start getting, much weirder, there's sort of weirder digital and synthy sort of, I guess, atmospheric music. And I was torn because I really thought the second half of the music, that music fits so much better. I know that, granted, it's been ages. I have different tastes. Modern horror movies have very different kinds of music than they had in the 80s. But this is always a gripe that I have with old horror movies, is that often there's a lot of weird stuff happening. It's very eerie, but then you hear strings in the background that sort of take you out of it. I don't feel like the strings fit very well. Because for something as mysterious, as otherworldly as this movie, to have something so grounded and so sort of real like strings, it felt like it didn't fit the scene and it took me out of it. It could have been more intense. Another thing was the acting. I will say it's not terrible. And I think that's especially important because, a lot of horror movies in the 80s and 90s typically had pretty bad acting. So to have acting that is sort of okay is honestly refreshing and is incredible that it even happened. But it still wasn't great. I don't really like the acting. Either this had to do something with the dialogue or something with the actual acting. Maybe I just didn't connect with the writing. The dialogue felt a little bit like line reading, like they had a monitor right in front of them. They're reading, "Oh no, the monster is coming for us." It's like, "I hate you. You seem really annoying." Now, for basically pure weaknesses, or I don't like to say weaknesses because that makes it sound objective, whatever. In my opinion, things I didn't really like about it, one of them was the pacing. One of the things that really frustrated about this movie is sort of the opening scene. I get that what it does is sort of establish the importance of the dog, as that later becomes an important character, and how that establishes sort of the monster and how that comes to be. Again, you need to see the movie to see what I mean. But at times it felt like that opening scene dragged on for so long without adding anything new. Even when we got to the base and the characters were talking, I felt like it was so much filler. For a movie that demands characters to be like really, really strong so that you care who is the monster, who is infected with a thing. Because if you don't care about anyone, then it's just person number 1, 2, and 3. And that sort of brings me to my next problem, which is really characterization. I really wanted much more out of the characters. And it was surprising because I expected a movie like this to put extra emphasis on the characters. Either they felt like completely identical in terms of personality. Again, except Kurt Russell. I think Kurt Russell did a great job with his character. Everyone else felt like really just sort of people to die or people to suspect of being a monster. And I felt like that made the ending less impactful. That made the story drag because I didn't really care what was happening to much of the characters. I don't know, especially with the mystery genre. If you compare it to more recent movies like Knives Out, for example. Again, this isn't horror, but it is comparable. I feel like characters work much better as emotional anchors in a whodunit kind of mystery because you want to care who it was by the end. You want to care about what's happening when you have a very character-focused story. Now, probably my biggest issue, honestly, is the cinematography. I guess this is also a trend of like 80s horror to have like pretty mediocre cinematography. But I felt like as tense as the movie is inherently, the cinematography was like shockingly like boring and sort of a little underutilized in my opinion. At times, it didn't feel only just boring, but it felt actively bad. When a lot of stuff was happening, the camera was too static. The vibe of the scene was it didn't match at all. It felt like the camera was sort of like filming a different movie because you had all this tense stuff happening and then you had just static shots of here, of there. And it was like I wanted to mix it up a bit. I've heard that John Carpenter is sort of a classic horror director who is incredible. And so when I saw this, I was shocked that I didn't connect at all with the way the camera was being used. So I will say some shots towards the end really caught my attention. I thought they were really good. But in general, I felt like the camera honestly actively harmed the movie itself. Now, you could simply just attribute this to being the style, again, of like 80s horror. I don't know. It didn't personally work for me. So what did I think of this? I think this movie is cool as shit on paper. There's just a lot that I don't really vibe with very well. I do, however, recommend you watch it because it still has a lot of good and it is a horror classic. And if you want to say you're a horror fan and you haven't watched this movie, well, you're stupid and you're not a horror fan. You're actually lying, by the way. I watched this movie like 2 months ago, by the way. So yeah, honestly, despite all the flaws that I feel the movie has, I feel like a lot of that can be attested to simply the passing of time. And if I watched this 40 years ago, maybe it would have blown me away. It probably would. There's a lot of stuff to like. But, you know, I'm a stupid Gen Z brain guy, you know. I'm only a teenager, basically. And it is the year of our Lord and Savior, 2025. So, you know, sadly, some stuff just get lost with time. And that's not my fault. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to objectively analyze. It's just my opinion. Okay, please don't bully me. Anyways, I would probably give it like a 5 out of 10. I know that may seem very harsh. I feel like it was kind of equal parts, things that I liked, things that I didn't like. Maybe it's not my thing. You know, it's okay. Not every movie has to be your thing. You can't like every classic. Some classics just aren't that good to you, and that's fine. Please, I'm still a real cinephile. I'm not stupid. I assure you, I like good movies. Look, that movie over there, that one in the back, that's critically acclaimed, right? I'm a good reviewer. Yes, cool. Anyways, if you like what you see, like and subscribe. More reviews coming soon. Maybe some other stuff along the way. Maybe more low effort content. Maybe more high effort content. But if you never subscribe, you'll never know. So subscribe right now. Go do it right now or your balls will explode. All right, peace. Also leave a comment saying that I'm stupid and my opinion is garbage. It's a kink thing.